and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington, and this is my podcast where I share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, which consists of 6 thoughts about reading, writing, or otherwise related to stories and storytelling. So I jotted down my 6 thoughts for the day, and I am ready to get started. Number 1, I thought I'd give a little update on Firmament Eleftheria, which has been publishing on Kindle Vella and actually just released the final episode yesterday. So all 22 chapters are now out, and they have to be out for at least 30 days before I can release the paperback and the regular ebook. So those will be out next month, but I do have them all formatted. Formatter just got back to me a few days ago, so I need to check those files, make sure everything's good, but we are well ahead of schedule for getting all of that published, so we are good to go, and it's really exciting to just see how people have been responding to it. I think the readers have said at least that they're enjoying it so far, and I'm definitely looking forward to hopefully getting some official reviews once I can get it up on, normal Amazon and on Goodreads and everything, because I just love so much. My favorite part about publishing is just getting to hear reader feedback, hear how it impacted people, what they enjoyed, if they did enjoy it, which hopefully people are able to enjoy, to a certain extent, my stories. So anyway, really excited about that and excited to take this book on to the next phase. So number 2, I'm currently working on book 9 in the Firmament series, which is called Intoxication, and I managed to break 10,000 words on that project this past week. I think I'm up to maybe 14,000 now, I don't remember. But yeah, it's been going well, would say overall. Definitely will need a lot of work in rewrites and edits, but I still think that it's a good framework. I'm getting the bare bones of it there, and that's something to work with, and I'm making good progress, and there are definitely parts of it, even though it's always a struggle writing, and I do really not enjoy most of the process, but I always find it's best when I can just see those moments where what I love about the story does shine through, and I'll have a moment where I do get really excited and enjoy writing it, and those are the points where I'm like, okay, I know that ultimately this is going to work, even if some of it is going to need some adjustment later. So I think for a first draft it's going well, and I'm glad that I've been able to stay on track with my word counts. I'm actually ahead of schedule. So that's been good, and we'll see if I'm able to continue that, but I think I should be able to. So number 3, Violet, my 4-year-old, I've shared that she loves books, and she can't read yet, but she can recognize a few words, but mostly, of course, just enjoys looking at the pictures, and she'll make up, little stories that go with the pictures and books. But my girls have a bookshelf in their room, and I've kind of arranged it, with the youngest books on the bottom, working up to the very top shelf that they can't reach at all has Harry Potter and Chronicles of Narnia and young adult books. So the very bottom, on the other hand, is a giant basket of just board books from Chick-fil-A and little Disney books that are okay for the 1-year-old to get into. So somewhere in between there's a shelf that's kind of I think it's second from the top, so it's pretty high up on the shelf, and it has some books that are a little bit more definitely older, chapter books. I'm trying to remember what's on that shelf. I know I have Mrs. Pigglewiggle up there and Winnie the Pooh, but there's also just some actual children's books that I just don't necessarily want them getting into as much because they can be a little rough with books, my girls. And some of these are books I'd really rather not get torn, at the moment. So anyway, it's just slightly a little bit older. So just the past few days, Violet has just discovered this particular shelf, and she always gets, because the other girls take naps and she doesn't, I always send her to get a few books to read during rest time. And she's been going in there and coming out with the books from this, higher shelf, asking me like, may I read this one? And can I have this one for rest time? And she is so excited. And, even though I didn't necessarily put the books there for them to get themselves originally, it's been so cute and just so sweet to watch her get so excited about these like new to her books, because some of them I've read to them before, but she hasn't been able to just like get them herself and like look at them in her own special quiet time, and she is just so excited about it, and I just absolutely love that. I just so love that these girls already love books so much, and I'm really especially excited for when she'll be able to actually read these, and it's just going to open up this whole new world for her. But in the meantime, I'm just letting her explore the new world of this small little shelf and the books that are on it. So that's been super fun. Number 4, this past week, I finished watching the TV show Angel, and I have literally been watching it off and on for like 5 years now. I started it before I even had kids. And part of it became that it's just harder for me to watch my shows as the kids are getting older, because they can't be around for me obviously watching a show like Angel, because it's super violent and scary and just like sort of like disturbing. So I obviously don't want that in their heads. So I couldn't watch it with them around. But then also like I would just get kind of tired of it and stop watching it for a long time and then pick it up again, because I love the characters, and I think that Joss Whedon is a good writer and a good creator. Like, I think he has interesting ideas, and I thought a lot of the writing on the series was good, but also some of the writing was not good, and it was a pretty dark show. Plus, sometimes I would just get annoyed with, even though I love the characters, I'd just be like, oh my goodness, why are we doing this again? So it was definitely a good show to like take some breaks from. But I finally finished it this past week, and the finale was good. I know that it got canceled kind of unexpectedly, so I think they did a good job wrapping it up with the time that they had. But one thing I did admire about it, and do find in a weird way kind of encouraging, was the way that they, I feel, were able to recover from those spells where the show was not so good. Because it would definitely go through times that it would just kind of start to drag, or I would be like, oh, like, why is this character doing this? Why is the story going here? Like, I don't want to watch this. Like, it would just get to be a bit too much, or something was off, or whatever. This happens with TV shows all the time, and I find that a lot of times, I want to say most times, the shows don't really recover from that. Like, a lot of times it just goes downhill at a certain point, and then that's just kind of the end. That's happened with so many shows that I've started off really loving, and then it's just like, well, I guess this is basically over. But I think in this show they really did a good job of, it would kind of start to like wane the quality or the appeal of it, but then they would kind of manage to pick it back up after another few episodes. And I actually find that encouraging, because especially as the writer of a series, I do feel like I'm gonna have some points where it's just not going to be my greatest work of all time. Like, I always do my best, but it's so hard to be objective about your work, even with the help of beta readers and things like that. And so there's going to be work that I put out that's just not the greatest. And so the idea that doesn't have to be like the end. I can come back at it again in the next phase of the story and do better, and learn from that, or just, that it doesn't have to be 100% perfect all the time. And it also doesn't have to be like one strike and you're out, like there is room, as long as, I think if you work hard and do your best and try to stay objective and get feedback and all those good things, there is a chance for you to recover from like a bad episode, a poor choice in your series, etc. So I don't know. I just, in a weird way, found some of the stumblings of the series a little bit encouraging. So let's see. Number 5 on my currently reading, I'm reading Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. Weir, I don't remember which way it's pronounced, for my book club. And I was really excited to pick this up because it's science fiction. And honestly, I don't read a lot of science fiction, which I would like to change because I think it's good to familiarize yourself with the genre that you're working in. So I hadn't heard of this book, although I had, of course, heard of The Martian, which is also by this author. And I haven't read that book either, actually, although I've seen the movie and really loved the movie, but probably another one I should read. But I'm only a few chapters into Project Hail Mary, so I can't really pass any judgments on it one way or the other as of yet. But just as of my impression in the first few chapters, it's kind of interesting because I am honestly not finding that I'm that impressed by the writing itself. Like, it's okay, but I always feel weird criticizing the writing of famous authors and best-selling authors because I'm kind of like, well, who am I to say anything about it? Like, I don't know, it feels kind of prideful, but this is obviously just my opinions. So there's just certain things about the writing that kind of don't strike me as like the greatest ever. I'm not saying like really bad, just kind of like, there's some things where I'm kind of like, I'm not sure if I would have written it that way. But I am still enjoying the story, and I do think there's certain things about the writing that are done really well that are enabling me to enjoy it. And also it's just like a very interesting premise, and it is revealed in a very interesting way. And I'm really trying to take note of this because, as I'll share a little bit later, I do struggle with kind of info dumping in my stories, and that is a particular challenge of science fiction because you're having to pass on so much like new and specific information to the reader that it's very difficult to convey that in an interesting way. And that is one thing I feel like the story is doing well. Like, he came up with a very interesting plot device that allows him to reveal information slowly and in a way that you're wanting to find it out, so it's not boring. And so that's pulling me in. Plus, like I said, the premise is interesting, and all the sciencey stuff just always makes me just like geek out a little bit. Because I always love that aspect of the storytelling because science is just fascinating. And I also like things that kind of like rekindle that spark because I don't, I'm obviously not a scientist. I don't have a lot of need for like studying science and knowing a lot of these things in my everyday life, but I still find, honestly, all of science is so fascinating to me. Like, I particularly love anatomy and physiology, but astronomy, like chemistry, everything, biology, it's all so fascinating to me. And so when I do get like hints of that in a sci-fi story, it just kind of makes me excited because it's very cool to me. So I'm enjoying that aspect a lot. So I'll probably give some updates when I get further in the book because it's a big book and I think I've read 5, maybe 6 chapters. So we'll see how it goes from here. But I am excited to do this for a book club, and I know not everyone is as nerdy as me about science. So I'll be curious to see how other people in the book club enjoy it. So number 6, I think I mentioned last week that I've been watching through some workshops from this like online writer summit type thing by Pro Writing Aid called the Science Fiction Writers Week. And there's been some really, really good sessions on there. Like, I feel like I've gotten so much out of it. And so I'm really grateful that I saw whatever random ad for this. And there was one really good one about marketing that I thought had some excellent tips for me as I'm trying to work on that aspect. And then there's just been some really good about, craft and storytelling and awesome stuff. It's also sort of like reigniting my storytelling nerd, which is never like totally asleep, but sometimes it's like, it's just maybe like snoozing a little bit, and then stuff like this just like really wakes it up. So it's good timing since I'm working on so many stories and all that. So I actually just started listening to a session, and I need to finish it this morning because I think this is my last day to watch stuff from the Writers Week. But I started listening to this session yesterday on narrative lensing, And that is not a term that I was familiar with, although I and everyone else, certainly every other writer, is essentially familiar with the concept. And I don't remember the name of the speaker on this workshop, unfortunately, but he was sharing that this is something that writers will tend to just pick up on or understand instinctively to a certain extent, but knowing it more specifically and paying more specific attention to it is really valuable. So I'm going to just explain real quick what that is. So the narrative lens is basically just the lens or the eyes and perspective through which everything in your story is filtered. So every detail that you give, everything that is said, the way it's said, the order in which it's said, basically everything that's communicated in your story is filtered through the perspective that you're writing from. And so that is what a narrative lens is, and that comes into play in every single choice you make when you're writing the story. So basically, one thing this guy was saying is that, let's say you want to describe something, and he kept using the example of, let's say you want to describe a werewolf. You can't describe it in abstract because you need to describe it in the way that your point of view character would describe it, and you need to describe it in a way that tells us something about that character, how they see the world, etc. So what one person is going to see is going to be completely different than what another person sees. So he was like, let's say it's a werewolf. Is your character who's seeing this werewolf another werewolf? Is it a werewolf hunter? Is it a scared, like, innocent citizen? Like, all those people are going to see it completely differently, and they're going to emphasize different things about it, and their attitude toward it is going to be different, which is going to affect the tone of your writing. Like, is it going to be terrified, or is it going to be predatorial? Like, so it really does affect everything. And so I find that really valuable, and I think especially writing from a first person point of view, which the Firmament series is, it's going to be even more direct because you're literally getting a view into the inner monologue and the thought life of this character. And so I think it's going to be really helpful to keep this in mind, especially once I go into rewrites, because I don't really try to think actively about this stuff as much during the first draft because it'll bog me down too much. I won't get writing done at all. But when I do go into rewriting, I think it was really going to help me with that problem I mentioned earlier of info dumping, because when it comes to the Firmament series, not only is it science fiction, but I unfortunately did, or fortunately, I don't know, but I did set myself up with a very complicated backstory. So I have to explain in every book to every new reader that Andy is adopted and she has this brother, but she didn't know him until recently, and how she became adopted and how she's related to this person. And then we get other, we'll start to have other characters come in that there's something unusual, and it's like, well, this guy's from another planet and this is, whatever. And I have to explain all these things. And now, of course, the more books there are in the series, the more events have come before that I want to explain a little bit for people that may not have read the past books, but explain just enough so they can understand what impact those events are having on this story. So I can be like, well, in a few books ago, this character died, and so here's the hole that's left in the life of the ship and the way that we're still grieving about it, or whatever. So I have to give all that stuff to the reader. And my tendency, as I think most people, is to just initially be very info dumpy. And my first chapter of Intoxication is definitely like that right now. Like, it's very well, here's where me and the doctor are now, and here's why he's so tired, and here's why I feel like this, and here's who this is, here's who that is, here's blah, 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 and this happened, 4 months ago, and whatever. And as I'm writing it, I just know, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is boring. This is not getting into the story, whatever. But it's just a first draft, so I'm plowing through it. But I think it is going to help if I keep this narrative lensing in mind when I go back into it. Try to look for plot devices that are going to help me reveal these things in a more natural way. So for instance, I have a new character come in a few chapters into the book. And so then she's having to have a lot of things explained to her. And then I start to think, well, if I could just introduce her earlier, for one thing, then I'm not having to explain this stuff twice, but also then it gives me a proper vehicle for explaining some of these things because it's coming up in a natural way. Like there's a reason for Andy to portray this information, which is that she's trying to get it across to someone who actually doesn't know it.